Yeah, okay. How was lunch? How were your lunch partners? Good. I'm sure they were good. Well, afternoon is here, and we're now about to hear Mike Cann, retired from the University of Scranton in 2017 as a distinguished professor of chemistry. After teaching organic chemistry for many years, in the last 25 years, his interest and expertise morphed to include environmental chemistry, green chemistry, and the broader interests in sustainability. Always a pioneer, in 2005 he initiated and for 10 years co-directed a faculty workshop to infuse sustainability across the curriculum at Scranton. So please welcome Mike Cann to the podium. A pioneer. Sure.
I think this is the first time I've been on stage with 1, 2, 3 mics. But let me first of all thank Sandra for doing all that she does, including the Schemmel Forum, but everything she does for the common good. Thank you, Sandra. Let me also say that you didn't miss Ash Wednesday. I had an encounter with a tree limb the other day. About 4 days ago, I thought it was going to knock me out. I had this goose egg this big. Yesterday, it had gone down. This morning I wake up, and what do I see? Would have traded places with Matt. I taught organic chemistry at 8 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, ladies and gentlemen. So imagine starting your year with 8 a.m. organic. It was fantastic. We had a great time. It was interesting. One day I walked into class, and it was a sea of green. And if you can, up that side, it says, the few, the proud, the insane, sunrise organic chemistry with an angry sun. It was great. A sea of green. I was like, what is this? And on the back, well, there's Cannisms, 10 Cannisms. Now you have to have been there to understand what these were about, like, what is a carbocation? Say, help! Take organic and you'll figure out what that means. But anyway, I would have gladly changed places with you. So now I get the after lunch crowd, for crying out loud, and everybody's asleep. But anyway, I had some good jokes for the ADM Organic class, so you had to do something, right? But anyway, what I'd like to do is chat with you a little bit about sustainability, at least my take on it, right? And this thing called the Delaware Highlands Conservancy, a fantastic conservation group that works to conserve natural lands in the upper Delaware. We'll talk more about that. So where are we going? Again, I want to talk about environmental sustainability, right? Ecological footprints, environmental disruptions we are facing, right? How land conservation is an integral part. I think I should bring Tim up here, right? Because he knows a lot more about this than I do. Here I am, an organic chemist, right? And by the way, I forget to bring my friend out. This is my friend. I bought this when I started teaching environmental chem, right? Environmental chem, because we could do a lot of different things with it, but even just, it's a conversation piece, so to speak. You know, one day, I'm invited to give a lecture down at Ursinus College, so I drove down there. I decided to take this with me. So, stuffed into the back of a Honda Civic Coupe was this. I had to let a little air out of it, right? But I'm driving down the highway and it's inching its way forward over the top of my head, and people are driving by looking over and going, honey, what is that? Is he a terrorist? What is he doing? But it was an ordeal, but that was the only time I took it on an adventure like that. But it was fun. Anyway, and then the Delaware Highlands Conservancy is really what we're going to talk about in the end. Now, sustainability, many different definitions, but this one is the one that I believe is most used, and I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense, right? Meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. It's like when I was a Boy Scout, right? When you went camping, you left your campsite better than what you found it, right? We're on campsite Earth right now, right? We're only here for a short period of time. We ought to be leaving it better than what we found it. Now, sustainability, I look at it as two things. Consumption of what? Natural resources, both renewable and non-renewable, right? And the creation of waste. Now, Mother Nature had a wonderful thing going, right? She'd consume resources, right? Create waste and then convert those resources or the waste back to resources. That's what we need Mother Nature for, right? We humans are such wonderful consumption machines. It's basically a one-way street. You know, we're consuming Mother Nature's capital, not just her interest, right? We're consuming her capital, not just her interest, and that's not sustainable. It's basically what it amounts to, right? And there's something called an ecological footprint. Go home and take your ecological footprint. Get online, and they'll ask you a bunch of different questions like, you know, what size house do you live in? What do you eat, right? How far do you travel? How often do you fly? Et cetera, and you'll come up with an ecological footprint. You'll be amazed. The bottom line is we're in ecological overshoot right at this point. The world's resources, we're using about 1.7 Earths at this point. Where's the 0.7 come from? Again, we're consuming Mother Nature's capital rather than just her interest. Get on that website, right? Get on that website and try it for yourself. The Holocene was a wonderful period, right? The last 12,000 years or so has been a nice, stable period in the history of the Earth. Nice, stable climate, for instance, right? We can thrive in this wonderful climate, right? And reproduce and have a wonderful life, right? It's at equilibrium, right? Well, some are suggesting we've now entered a new era, epoch, called the Anthropocene, where humans basically are now disturbing the Earth's equilibria, and there's so many of them, that we're not only having local, regional, but global effects on the chemistry, the biology, the physics of the planet, right? Our ecological footprint is just huge. Oh, this is an old equation, right? But it helped me. This is back from the 70s, I think it was Paul Ehrlich. The bottom line is, help me wrap my hands around our environmental impact. So you see here, I don't think that works pretty good on the wall, but anyway, I is the environmental impact, right? P is population, A is affluence, right? And T is technology. So the bottom line is, the combination of these three things has created the perfect environmental storm. Yeah. Right? Created the perfect environmental storm, ladies and gentlemen. The planet is being battered by our environmental impact. You know, as I said, I taught environmental chemistry. I taught it for over 20 years. Right? And there's a story behind that too, but my big mouth got me in trouble. Right? As an organic chemist, I shouldn't have been teaching environmental chemistry. There's a story there. But the bottom line is, I realized that when I started teaching environmental chemistry and learning about it, and actually ended up as a co-author of the environmental chem text, that environmental chemistry wasn't the natural chemistry of the air, water, and soil. It was more and more how humans have altered the natural chemistry of the air, the water, and the soil. It's unbelievable what we're doing to this planet. It's really cool from a scientist's viewpoint. It's like, oh, let's try doing this, shall we? And see what it does, right? Holy mackerel. Like emission of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. If I came to you, Diane, you rule the world. She does too, doesn't she, Richard? I come to you, Diane, as a scientist, and you rule the world. I said, Diane, I'm really curious as a scientist, what will happen if I just spew all this massive carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? I have a lot of hypotheses. I need to try to prove them or not. I come to you and say, what do you think? Would you go, yeah? Yes. Yeah, I think so, right? The bottom line is we're doing all these wonderful experiments on this planet, and to a scientist, these are pretty cool. They're depressing, though. Very depressing. So, if we think about these things, 1947 was a wonderful year.
Yeah, look at that.
They said, Mrs. Cann, it's a baby boy, and they named him Michael. Why am I talking about 1947? When I was born, the population of the Earth was 2.5 billion people. 2.5 billion. Whoa, that's a lot, isn't it? Well, by the time I was 40, it was now 5 billion. Doubled my first 40 years on this planet. By the time I was 70, a couple years ago, it had tripled to 7.5 billion people in my lifetime. I know, you look at me, I'm old, but come on. 70 years, 72 years, in terms of geologic time is nothing. But the population of this planet tripled in my lifetime. Jeez. Well, if there was one or two of us on this planet, we could create as much waste as we want and use as much water and other resources as we want. Big deal. Hey, how many people remember this tagline? Nowadays when I use this with my students, I retired a couple of years ago, they were like, I want to be like Mike. Who are we talking about, Kevin?
The name escapes me.
Oh, you're kidding. Michael Jordan, yeah. I want to be like Mike Jordan. I'm not talking about that Mike, I'm talking about that one. So what do you mean? Who the heck wants to be like me? Right? Who would ever want to be like me? But the bottom line is, there's about 1.5 billion of us who live like Mike and Richard and Diane and Kevin, like you folks. And the other 6 billion, right, or so, would like to live like we do. And I don't blame them one bit, do you? I don't blame them one bit. Affluence, or affluenza, is really what we've caught, right? Affluenza. When you think about what you have, how big a house do you live in? Do you really need that big a house? How many cars do you have? How many computers? How long a shower do you take, for crying out loud? You know what I'm saying. What do you eat? How much do you throw away of that food? They say about 30% of the food on the planet, I believe, is wasted. That's what I've heard. So you think about your affluent lifestyle, how high you live off the hog, literally and figuratively, right? It's called affluenza. And the bottom line is, be like Mike, drink. By the way, classy tie, huh? Periodic table. Periodic table tie. I mean, everybody wants to be like Mike. This is GDP growth, right? GDP growth over the last 10 years or so. And you say to yourself, okay, well, you look at the two most populous countries on the planet, China and India, they have about a third of the world's population. And you look at their GDP growth compared to the world, and compared to the US. I want to be like Mike. And they're doing a darn good job of trying to catch up to us. But the problem is the American dream, the way it's structured, terms of resources use and waste is the world's nightmare. We all can't live so high off the hog, so to speak. So affluence is just, whoa. Technology is the third one. Now here's where I tell you, most technologies have been developed without consideration of what it's going to do to the environment. And if I was going to talk about chemistry for the rest of this talk, we could do that, right? I'd ask you what you think of the word chemical. I know when I go to parties and people ask me what I do and they say, I'm a chemist, they all go, why? Because they think of the word chemical. They think of toxic waste and, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, that sort of thing. Okay, all right. I understand. Chemists have not paid enough attention to the environmental consequences of what we do. There's no question about it. And we deserve that. But by the way, this wouldn't be here if it wasn't chemistry. The pants I'm wearing wouldn't be here, right? That cell phone or that computer or you name it, better things for better living through chemistry. But we haven't paid enough about the consequences of what we do. And I'd be starting to say, wait, hold on. Chemists are now doing this. There's something called green chemistry, environmentally blind chemistry, sustainable chemistry, where we're cleaning up our act, and I tell you about that now. But that's not the focus here today. Focus is, conservation of natural resources, the conservation of natural lands, particularly forests. So I put up a technology, pictures of technology up here, right? And let's cut down a tree, How long does it take that dude to cut down the tree with an axe? Then we invented, this big two-person saw. And then a chainsaw. And now we have these huge machines, right? Which go through the forest and go, they take the tree away. So technology can clear that forest a heck of a lot more faster than we ever could before, right? And did we talk about the environmental consequences of these technologies? Right? So technology can be our friend now. Tim was mentioning some different types of technology that can be our friend, and we've got to embrace them. We've got to encourage them. We've got to have a political climate that encourages these sorts of things. Environmental disruptions that we're facing, you can come up with a list that's twice as long with this. But these are all the things that are happening now. Holy mackerel! Right? Devastated forest, that's key to our discussion, right? Loss of biologically productive land, that sort of ocean acidification, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Great experiment that we're conducting on this planet. Interesting things happening. What do we do about it? Pictures. Diane, well, I can't wait to hear her talk and see her pictures, right? Seeing is believing, isn't it? If I told you there was a CO2 molecule that just went by and slammed into the side of my head and gave me that, you'd say I was crazy. You can't see that CO2 molecule, can you? Or the oxygen molecules in that, but we can see results, right, of a lot of these things, right? This is right here, melting permafrost. These houses were constructed on permanently frozen ground. Well, permafrost is melting, releasing massive amounts of methane and carbon dioxide and that sort of thing. Tim mentioned the Arctic, the Arctic ice, right? Melting. Opening up the Northwest Passage, and frankly, companies are now killing one another to get the drilling rights to the Arctic. Drill, baby, drill. Yeah. Right? Let's drill. Right? Sea level rise. Right? Desertification, bleaching of coral reefs. Spruce bark beetle is now able to live further north because it's warmer. Killing trees. That's what that's a result of. So those trees. Glaciers, you've all seen pictures of glaciers. There and there. Now you see it, now you don't, right? And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more next talk. And there's a land development. This guy is the expert in that sort of thing, and I hesitate to even put this up here, right? Right? But the bottom line is, this is an old one. This is from a paper 2012, and I think they got it from a paper in 2007. But the bottom line is, the way I look at it is, let's see, total land area modified by humans, about 51%. Is that about right? Something like, anyway, you can quibble about the numbers, but it's big. And you say to yourself, okay, what's left? Well, 49%, right? It says forested area, about 27%, 28% left forested, right? And what's the other? This part right here is just largely high mountains, tundra, deserts unsuitable for agriculture. You know, hey, you want to buy some desert in the middle of wherever? Come, stop by. A river in peril. Oh my God, my friends from the Delaware Highlands Conservancy are going, what the heck is he doing? The Delaware River is not in peril. No, it's not the Delaware. This is what not to do with a river. You mentioned draining the swamp, basically, in Florida. Yeah, this is the Caloosahatchee River. Now, I have a little place about right there that I inherited from my parents, a little dinko place. Right? I went to a talk, right? I went to a talk by John Cassani of the Caloosa River Keeper. All these slides are courtesy of him. And this is the Caloosahatchee River. This is, you may have heard of Sanibel, Fort Myers. This is where it is, right there. Well, the bottom line is this was the original watershed for the Caloosahatchee River, the blue area. And then what did they do? Well, they dug all these canals, et cetera, to drain the swamp for agricultural development, etc. And they also dug a little canal between Lake Okeechobee and there. They weren't connected before. So now the Caloosahatchee drains this whole area. Picture of Lake Okeechobee. As you see, this is July 2nd, 2018, a little over a year ago. 90% of it is covered with algae. 90% of that lake is covered with algae right there. It's a NOAA picture. All right? This is the Caloosahatchee River. All right? Yeah. Animals. You know, but some blue-green algae gives off toxins. That's what they're finding with some of this. Right? Not all blue-green algae. I'm not a biologist, believe me, or a microbiologist. But come vacation with us, ladies and gentlemen, on the wonderful shores of Sanibel, Fort Myers, you know, this area of Florida. Yeah, great ad, right? This is what it looked like. These are actual pictures, folks. So the bottom line is obviously tremendous economic impact, right? I am glad I don't have $1 million house on this area. Mine's a little dinko place I inherited from my parents, right? And by the way, here's a picture of development in this area. Again, this is Fort Myers right in here. Cape Coral across there. This is Sanibel Island out here, if you're familiar at all with that area. And that was 1960. Oh, I did it again. It's 2014. The red is the development area. Every time you turn around when you're down there, there's a new development going up. It is phenomenal. You know, all these baby boomers are retiring and they want their place in the sun. I got mine already, so you can't have yours, but development. So the idea is, this is what you don't want to do to a river, right? This is what you don't want to do. You don't want helter-skelter development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is the consequences of this type of thing. So it's not only its development is runoff because there's no more vegetation to slow the runoff and to act as a riparian buffer before the runoff gets into the river, nutrients from farming, from golf courses, from your front yard, etc. and also a warming climate. Yep. Why should we conserve natural lands? I think probably we just made a case. But one of the things I think is fabulous about natural lands and forests and that sort of thing is to commune with nature. You know, how many people have been to walk through the woods and just, wow, this is relaxing, this is wonderful, all my thoughts and cares go out the window, it's beautiful. I need some photography lessons. This is my backyard.
Wow.
I take a walk most every morning, sometimes in the afternoon and evenings also. These are some pictures. We have 18 acres of land, right, on a lake, right? And these are some of the things I see. And I just want to point out a couple. You see that rotting log back there? That's not just a rotting log. That's where defying death, walking the tightrope, is McKenna Jane Axtell. My grandchildren, that was the tightrope they walked back there. And you see Mother Nature's watching over them right there, right? And, oh, this is a natural bridge. I call it Rick's Bridge, right? Because Rick is a friend of mine from Toronto. He was the only one who ever dared to walk across that log. I know I don't. That's Rick's Bridge right here. This is Split Rock. This is where the water leaves, if the stream leaves our property under an old arch bridge, etc. And these are some of the friends I see on my walk, right? You see this guy right here scared the heck out of me. I was walking along, just kind of minding my own business, and all of a sudden I looked up and there was this rather large bear sitting by that rather large hemlock tree. And he was looking at me, I was looking at him, and I said, I remembered you never run from a bear unless you're with somebody who can run faster than they can. But Cindy wasn't with me that morning. That's my wife. So I said, oh, what do I do now? And I thought about it for a minute or two, and then I said, well, I'll take a picture of him, and I get a bunch of pictures as it's running at me so everybody knows what happens. So by the time I got my camera out of the pocket, opened it up, found the app, the bear had started to walk around the tree and thankfully lumbered off into the woods. He didn't want any part of me more than I did, but it was interesting, wonderful to see him. You see this little guy, where is he? Right here. We have a 16-foot slider out onto our deck. I had the slider open except for the screens, right? Except for the screens. Well, I look out and there's this little bear coming up the stairs onto the deck, and I said to Cindy, look. She went, oh! Well, he didn't like that, so he went off and played on the swings. Here's the swings from my grandchildren. We have a nesting pair of bald eagles on our lake. Cool, huh? This is Junior. There's Junior on a log. My son took the pictures of the bald eagle, but that was Junior squawking away saying, Mom and Dad, how do I fly? It was amazing at that point. Right? This might be the most interesting picture. I don't know if you can see it well enough, but these are two herons. One of the herons is spread out like this, in the stream, and the other one's standing on top of them, see, and they're fighting. I've never saw that before. Never saw that. We were sitting on the deck, and all of a sudden my son hears this, and I hear it. He grabs his camera, and pretty cool, man. I think that's pretty cool. But anyway, so those are some of the friends, and this is what I see in the end. Now, I don't live on the Delaware, but I live in the Delaware watershed. So these molecules of water end up in the Delaware River, right? And I just live over the mountain over here, a little lake called Lake Henry, right, on the other side of Music Mountain. It's beautiful. So I believe communing with nature is fantastic. But that's not the most important thing, right? The most important thing is how forests and these natural lands help to clean up our act, right? Help to be a bulwark against our ecological footprint, right? Sequester carbon dioxide we've already heard about that sort of thing. These trees absorb CO2, provide oxygen, reducing cleansing, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, these are helping us mitigate our ecological footprint, right? And here's how I look at it. Nature's technology, right, is helping to lessen our environmental impact on the planet. So it's so important that we keep these forests, right? We keep these forests intact. And, you know, every one of these environmental disruptions, right, is mitigated in part by conserving our natural lands. We could go through each one of these and discuss every one of these and talk about how, right? It's so important to conserve these natural lands, particularly and this is a diagram. I'm not so sure about these numbers anymore, but the bottom line is, right, this is the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is how carbon cycles through Mother Nature in various forms. And of course, the one we're most familiar with is the one way up the top. Carbon dioxide is what we're really worried about, right? You know, as Tim said, there's CO2 molecules. They vibrate like this. The carbon-oxygen bond is polar because oxygen likes electrons more than carbon. So there's a partial minus charge, partial plus charge there. And that molecule is doing this. And the other oxygen is also doing that. And this sort of thing. Well, because of its dipole, it absorbs infrared radiation. Oh, you can't see infrared radiation. Maybe you're the bionic man, though. Remember how the button anyway. Yeah, you don't have an infrared detector in your eyeball, but you can feel it as heat. So this is what we feel as heat, that infrared radiation. We feel it as heat. Well, that molecule, when infrared radiation comes back off the surface of the planet, it goes like this. It's going like this, and all of a sudden, the right wavelength or frequency of infrared hits it, and it goes, he gets excited. And then what it does is eventually it comes back down. And what does it do? It re-emits that heat or that infrared radiation, some of it back down towards the Earth. And that's how it keeps us warm. If it wasn't for these greenhouse gases, the average temperature on this planet would be 0 degrees. Do you get that? 0 degrees. Not high 50s. That's what our average temperature is, high 50s or so. So we should thank these greenhouse gases. And N2, the most abundant component of the atmosphere, 78%, virtually doesn't absorb infrared because it doesn't have a dipole. It has to have a dipole. Nor does O2, 21% of the atmosphere. So only this guy and a few other ones that Tim mentioned absorb infrared. Right? Now, what's the problem? So we thank God that we have an atmosphere. And that atmosphere has greenhouse gases in it. Well, the problem is, this used to be an equilibrium. The amount of CO2 going into the atmosphere would equal the amount that's going out. It's called a steady state. Concentration of CO2 will remain the same. What are we doing? Overwhelming poor old Mother Nature. The bottom line is if we add up all these, this way and this way, right, these two are anthropogenic causes. We add up all this, we end up with these numbers, and we got more going into the atmosphere than we have coming out, is the bottom line. And Mother Nature is just going, time out, uncle, right? She can't handle it. You know, a lot of, of course, trees and forests are absorbing this carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, taking this gas and making it into a solid carbohydrate, right? And producing oxygen, by the way. And that's probably pretty important, too. But the bottom line is we've got a finger on the scale here. And we're putting 3 extra gigatons or so. Giga is 10 to the 6, by the way, or a billion. Right? We're putting this extra 3 gigatons into the atmosphere. So that number up there, 750, you see it way at the top? That's the amount of gigatons of CO2 that's in the atmosphere. That's a lot more than that, because these are old numbers at this point. And these are all the equations. Right? This is coal, oil, natural gas, all produce CO2. Right? All produce CO2. Again, We are screwing up Mother Nature, is the bottom line, right? This was an article, you see, July 5th. Not too long ago, right? In one of the most respected journals on the planet, Science, right? I haven't read the whole thing. I've read the abstract and read some articles about it. But they claim the cheapest way, I'm sure Tim will have a lot to say about this, the cheapest way is to plant a trillion trees, right, to combat carbon dioxide. That doesn't mean you can stop everything else. But that's their papers. A bunch of Swiss scholars published that, right? Interesting. Trees. But as we put it, hey, we want to conserve the 3 trillion trees that we already have, ladies and gentlemen. Conservation, right? And then this next one, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. I believe this is the only report they put out focused on climate change and land. Is that right, Tim? Yeah, I'm very intimidated. I'm just a chemist standing up.
You're doing very well.
I'm doing all right? Okay, great. I didn't sleep last night. Right? Again, this is not my... Hey, we could talk about electrophilic aromatic substitution and I'd feel a lot more comfortable. What do you say, shall we? But anyway, IPCC report, conserve lands that sequester carbon. Bingo, conserve natural lands, folks. Everybody's saying this. Yeah, reforestation, reverse desertification, and plant-based diet. Yeah, these are the things they're talking about. Hey, this is August 8th, 2019, hot off the presses, right? Delaware Highlands Conservancy, in rides the folks on the white horse, right? That's what we're all about, is conserving natural lands, right? Forests in particular, right? This is what we're all about, right? This was a statement of our founder. This person was a visionary and a mover and shaker, just like Sandra, right? Just like Sandra, right? She lived, right, where Maryland area, after World War II, the lakes and rivers and streams were getting all mucked up. And then she came to the promised land, right? The Delaware, the upper Delaware River, right? And she kayaked from Narrowsburg to Port Jervis and said, God, this is some of the cleanest water I've ever seen. And she said to herself, well, how can we protect this from, helter-skelter development? This river's within what? 150 miles of over, I would say at least 12 million people. It's a hop, skip, and a jump from New York City, for instance. I think it's less than 150 miles from Philly, the upper Delaware. And again, she wondered how we could accommodate the growth without spoiling the waters. She said, hey, it's up to us. And that's how the Delaware Highlands Conservancy was formed. Barbara Yeaman. 25 years ago, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary at this point. Where do we work? The upper Delaware, which includes Wayne and Pike counties in Pennsylvania, and Delaware and Sullivan counties. And this is the east branch of the Delaware. West branch, they meet just below Hancock and flow down past Port Jervis, past Milford, right? The upper Delaware River. I was asking people the other day, how many miles do you think that is? And Karen's our president. Karen, how many miles did we figure? 80, 100? Anyway, 75, I think, but then another 15 maybe there and 15 there in the east and west branch, right? That's where we work. How do we do it? By conservation easements. The bottom line is, Josephine comes to us and says, I love the land that I live on, and I want to conserve it. I want to conserve it in perpetuity. So I write a conservation agreement up. The bottom line is it's a legal agreement, right, between the landowner, right, and the Conservancy, right? And again, it's tailored in many ways to meet the landowner's wants and needs. But basically, it prevents development on that particular piece of land. They might have let's say 100 acres. We might take 5 acres out of that, and that'll be a minimal protection area. So you could have a house there if you don't already have one. To have one, you could build a barn there too, or something of that nature. So there's an area where we say, yeah, you can do certain things in that area, houses, et cetera, et cetera. But the rest of it remains undeveloped. And this is in perpetuity, right? This is not till you sell the land. The conservation easement goes with the property, not with the owner. So you have to really make sure you understand what you're getting into, and we do our darndest to make sure people do, right? And again, the person continues to own the land. They continue to own the land. It's not ours, it's not the Conservancy's, it belongs to the individual, right? So these are conservation easements, and we protected over 15,000 acres at this point. And there's probably, I don't know, I'd have to sit down and there's several more thousand in the works right now that we're working on conservation easements on. Benefits. Lots of different benefits, right? Tourism protects working lands, et cetera, and I've added this. Lowers our ecological footprint. That, to me, is the most important. That's why I think we should focus on why we do this sort of thing. What else do we do? Women and their woods. Is Amanda still here? Oh, there's Amanda. If you want to hear about women in their woods, Amanda, raise your hand, Amanda, wave, so everybody can see. Talk to Amanda, right? It's a fantastic program, right? Basically sold out is basically, what is it? A damn making fun program teaches women to effectively care for their lands. It's a really great bonding experience too. Want to go? Amanda, talk to Amanda. I can't go though. I can't go. What else do we do? Well, one of the things we have is something called the Green Lodging Partnership. There are certain hotels, bed and breakfasts in our area which ask their guests if they would like to contribute $2 to the Delaware Highlands Conservancy for their stay. So if they stay a week, if you stay a day, would you contribute $2? It's a wonderful program. We have some wonderful partners. Some of the ones that you probably have heard of, if you're from this, Woodlock. Woodlock is an incredible place out in Hawley. I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you haven't, incredible, world-class facility. The Settlers Inn in Hawley. Anybody been to the Settlers? Beautiful place. The Ledges Hotel, also in Hawley. There's one of our green lodging partners. Silver Birches. Used to be Earhart's on Lake Wallenpaupack. You see this picture right here? Oh, it's gorgeous. That's the Delaware River down there. This is Ecce, E-C-C-E. It's out of Berryville, on the New York side of the river. I went there. Cindy and I took a ride this summer, said I'm going to go to Ecce. The view is even more spectacular than that would indicate. That's one of our bed and breakfast partners. And we also have drinks for the Delaware. There are certain establishments like the Wallenpaupack, did I get it right? The Wallenpaupack Brewery, right? Has a beer, I think a month a year, and part of the money from that proceeds goes towards the Delaware Highlands Conservancy. We have coffee shops in Honesdale. Was it Brass? Black and Brass, right? Or a portion of the sale goes to the Delaware Highlands Conservancy, right? Eagle Watch program. I wish Jason was here. Jason runs our Eagle Watch program. This is an incredible program, right? We have, I think this is, what's this up to? At least 60 volunteers, I believe now, for our Eagle Watch program. It runs during the winter months, particularly January and February, bus trips. They're oversold, right? to go see the eagles along the Delaware, particularly where the Lackawaxen meets the Delaware in the wintertime. It's open water, right? Tremendous program. These are some of the events, just a list of events, and you see, again, the Eagle Watch buses right there. Conserving your family lands. Talk about, this is what we talk to various groups about conservation easements, Foods of the Delaware Highlands dinner. This is our gala dinner. Come join us. It's a big fundraiser. We hold it at Silver Birches, right? Women in their woods, native plant walks, et cetera, firefly picnic. These are held at a New York office over near Bethel, New York. And one of the highlights of it is, I can't remember his name, from, what is it, the Delaware Raptor Center in Milford, comes with birds of prey, right? Raptors. The ones they cannot reintroduce into the wild. But he had this owl, I forgot what the name of it was, about this big. Then he had was it a barn owl, right? It was gorgeous. Then he had a red-tailed hawk, right? And the very last, he had an eagle on his arm. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was sitting right there. I was from here to here with that eagle. It was he does a wonderful presentation. Oh, what else is here? Again, firefly pickup. How about that? The Shumway Forum. And again, these were a lot of things. We do most all of these things every year, but to celebrate our 25th anniversary, right? Oh my God, how'd that get in there? How'd that get in there?
Your grandchildren.
These are my 5 grandchildren. And you know, I care about all 7, what do we got? 7.7 billion people on this planet. I really do. But this is really what brings it home for me, right? I use this when I talk about green chemistry too. This is where my passion comes from, because it makes it personal to me. I'm 72. I'm going to spend the rest of my days living on a pretty wonderful planet. But what's going to happen 50 years, 60 years from now when they're my age? Are they going to say, Pop, what did you two and your generation do to our planet, right? This is what makes it. I mean, that was, by the way, my 60th birthday party. 12 years ago. We just took the 2 oldest to visit colleges this year. I mean, look at them. Look at those faces. By the way, there's a story behind Donald Duck. Right? What can you do? One of the things we'd like you to do is join us as a volunteer. Perhaps even consider becoming a board member. Or your local conservancy. Or there's so many other things to do besides conservancies that you can benefit the environment, right? So many things. So think about what you can do, but if you'd like to think about volunteering with the Conservancy and having fun doing something like this, please do. These are our staff people. Diane, can you wave? She's our executive director, our head honcho. Right? Amanda's here. So, Mancha Subchin. And our newest member, she's been with us a week now. Kate Hausman. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and I've had fun. I hope maybe you had fun too.
So how much more land do you need to protect?
All of it.
What's the size of your watershed?
Big.
I always get the number wrong.
Give me a guess. I'm putting Diane, our president and our vice president. Where's Mary Sue? Mary Sue's here too. You can take it too, Mary Sue.
Like when you think about it, so it's Wayne and Pike counties, Sullivan and Delaware counties, we go down into Monroe County. We tend to stick in the county.
Right.
Monroe. So, it's really, at this point, fairly limitless.
Yeah. But, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, believe me. It's not. And by the way,
Public land, is there a certain amount of public land?
yes. Certain amount of public land. there's the, you get down, at least at the lower end, into Delaware water gap, thank you. And state game lands, there's a lot of state lands and that sort of things in the area too. And when we're looking for conservation land, we have different criteria as to, what we would like to see. If it's contiguous with other conserved land, that's great, right? If it's has a wonderful stream on it, that sort of thing. So we don't just take every Tom, Dick, and Harry, so to speak. Animal habitat. Tributaries, water, et cetera, et cetera.
There's a lot that goes into it. So how much we need to do? The sky.
Believe me, I won't see the end of it.
Mike, the state of our water is a concern. Like the lake in Florida that you showed that was toxic. We have toxic lakes in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that ever happening before. Dogs are dying, they're going and drinking out of the lakes and are dying. So what hope do we have for these local waters?
I think, again, conservation. But one of the things you need to worry about if you live near a lake like I do is leaving a riparian buffer between your property and the lake. In other words, don't mow right down to the lake. I see these people, mowing right down to the edge of the lake. Their glass clippings are going in there. They're fertilizing, the runoff is going. Nutrients are horrible, right? And that's one of the huge problems. Our lake is pretty darn good, right? But I still see people where they've left no riparian buffer between their lake. In other words, you need plants and things like that to absorb the nutrients before it gets into the water. There's a fantastic article. It was a 30-year study, and I wish I remember the guy's name. He's from outside of Philadelphia. I could pull it up on my computer just like that, who did a 30-year study on riparian buffers. And believe it or not, he came up with you really should have 100-foot riparian buffer between you and your water. It's like, holy mackerel, that's a lot. But anyway, you ought to be leaving at least 10, 15, 20 feet between you and any body of water. But climate change is a huge issue, huge issue. I mean, Tim emphasizes it. I couldn't emphasize it anymore. That's the biggest environmental problem we face. And it's like the environment is a system. You just don't affect this one little thing, right? It affects this, and this. You poke this and it comes out the other side, so to speak. And there are so many things that we don't even have a clue what's going to happen 10 years down, 20 years. We know a lot more about the science of the environment now than we did 50 years ago, right? We know now we shouldn't be putting chlorofluorocarbons into the atmosphere, i.e. freons, because they're wonderful, stable molecules. They don't decompose. They don't burn. And that made them great refrigerants. Put them in your air conditioner. But the fact that they're such stable molecules, those carbon-fluorine and carbon-chlorine bonds are so stable, Mother Nature can't gobble them up in the troposphere. Most of the pollutants that we put into the troposphere, Mother Nature has a way to clean up after us, but not chlorofluorocarbons. They rise up into the stratosphere, and only then, in the presence of high-energy ultraviolet light, which doesn't make it down here to the surface of the Earth, thank God. Otherwise, we'd be nocturnal, right? We'd be nocturnal, right? It doesn't make it down here, but that high-energy light is enough to break the carbon-chlorine bond. And guess what? Chlorine atoms eat ozone for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in a catalytic way. We know that now. That's why the world got together and said, hey, let's see if we can find a substitute for chlorofluorocarbons. We still need air conditioners and refrigerators and that, but what can we find that doesn't impact the ozone layer? And we did a pretty good job, the world coming together. climate change is a much bigger nut to crack. Oh, but we better pull out all the stops at this point. There is a lot of technology out there, but we need to encourage it. We need to embrace it. We need to let science and engineers come up with solutions and put these solutions into action. We have to have the political will to do this sort of thing. And we have to believe this stuff. You know, scientists aren't trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, right? They're really not. I don't know why people feel that way. But anyway, sorry.
Mike, I'm thrilled to hear some of your professional life, because I love working with you as a board member. And I wanted to ask, most of the staff that you've listed up there are young and committed. And, and that means a lot to me, because I do hope the next generation takes this more seriously. So I wanted to ask about those students that you taught environmental chemistry to. Were they, do you think that their generation is going to be able to do what our generation of baby boomers, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be able to address?
I'm hopeful. I have to be hopeful. I have to be hopeful. I mean, you know, Mother Nature, this planet's going to be here whether we have destroyed our home or not. It's going to be here. Whether, you know, humans have destroyed this wonderful environment. The planet will be here and probably regenerate. Who knows how long it will take or whether humans will survive? I don't know. But I'm hopeful they will. I see it with young people. I even see it with older people, you know, like me. You know, if I can believe in it, you know, why not? Geez. But the idea is the science is there on so many of these issues. It really is. But you know, scientists never prove anything. We gather data, right? And we say, okay, this data is consistent with da-da-da-da-da, right? We never can prove anything beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? There's nothing, science can't do that sort of thing. We can collect as much data, right, with these different experiments that we do, but we can never prove it. We can say, we conclude that, you know, climate change is happening, and here's all the results of it. This is why it's happening, right? Boom. But if you said to me, does that prove it? No. No. The fact that you can see something, does that prove something? Right? You're going to see some wonderful pictures. You know, that's oftentimes, you know, seeing is believing. And that's why we need people like Diane. I think we're going to see some wonderful pictures. By the way, yeah, bet you wonder what that is, don't you? But the bottom line is, we don't ever prove anything beyond the shadow of a doubt. We collect data and we say, yes, this is consistent with this hypothesis. No, it isn't, or we need to do more research, right? And then get more data, say, oh yeah, that's also consistent with this hypothesis. So is this data, so is this data. You know, we're pretty darn certain. You notice the IPCC reports never say global warming is occurring. They talk about it as a probability, right? They talk about it as a probability. You know, 95% probability that da-da-da-da-da. So again, it never says that. And the reason is scientists can't prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt.
How long is it now that this problem has come to the surface? I mean, so clearly.
With climate change?
The dangers.
I mean, they were talking about, yeah. Oh, but this goes way back to Arrhenius. Way back, I believe it was 1800s or so. People were talking about vaporizing the coal mines. In other words, taking that solid carbon, and making it into CO2. And they knew back then it absorbed infrared radiation. They were talking about that sort of thing, 100 years ago or so, But it's not until, when the blank starts hitting the fan that we go, maybe we ought to do something about this, right? Maybe we ought to do something. It takes a lot to get us off the dime as the human race. So, but it's been pretty darn clear for decades now. Yeah, I mean.
When it actually became a serious front and center issue, I'm just wondering.
Right. Well, Rachel Carson brought to light that in the 60s,
Yeah.
Hey, do you remember the song, Big Yellow Taxi? Joni Mitchell? Hey, Paradise put up a parking lot. Do you remember that one? That was 1969. I mean,
It's rather recent, we're saying.
yeah, depends on, what's recent, It was long before the freshman students on this campus were around here, that's for sure. That's for sure. But anyway. Oh, what do I have? Oh, you had to ask that. Just 2 seconds. Another hat that I wear is this. I do science demonstrations, right? And my skit is called Science is Fun with Dr. Squared. What's that all about? My parents named me Michael Charles Cann. What's my initials? MCC. MC squared, or squared for short. Science is Fun with Dr. Squared. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a lot of work went into making this ordered. All these little balls I put in here one by one. Blue on the bottom, white on the top. It's called order. And to order something requires work. Oh my God, what did I do? Do you know how long it took me to order those? Do you know how long that took? Wait a minute. Oh, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? Anyway, Science is Fun with Dr. Squared. I'll be doing that next weekend for a family weekend, but I'm going to my 50th high school reunion. I mean, college reunion. But look at the order. Work was required to do that. If you threw a deck of cards up in the air, right, that were all ordered, you'd expect them to come right back down into your hand in the same order, wouldn't you? It takes a lot of work to put those cards back in order. This is called entropy. That's the natural state of the universe. Disorder, in other words. How do these go back to being ordered? Would you like to use? Should I? You ready? Thank you.
An understatement. And you've certainly taught us a lot, and we've had a lot of fun with you. And take care of your bumps.
Yes.
And thank you. We'll have a few minutes before the next and last program. So grab a coffee or whatever's out there.
I'm still locked up. I've been not saying it.
You are, yeah. Good job. Well done.
Oh,